Hello everyone. So we are going to be doing our focus tutorial. This month we are going to focus on a horse hoof and leg as well. So this is a draft horse's hoof and leg. So there's some nice feather detailing. He's also got some varying colors in his leg to work off of, from the white to the black to the light brown. So there's some very nice little fine little details to work off of, as well as some textures in the hoof. So I thought this will be a nice combination of fur as well as some other different types of texture. So as always, we will be using graphite pencils. So I've got my Cretacolor Fine Art Graphite Pencil and then the Faber-Castell 9000 graphite pencils. I've got my Tombow Mono Eraser, my putty eraser, blending stumps, as well as a soft bristle brush. I don't think we'll be using anything else in this tutorial like the jelly roll. And then obviously we will just be using my Cretacolor graphite powder as well. And then yeah, so this I will have added the line drawing in the previous post as well as the reference photo. So yeah, we're just going to focus on one leg rather than both. So the back one is a bit more out of focus than the front leg. So we will be doing that. So let's get started. This is just this little A5 piece size here. I'll put the correct dimensions up as well. So yeah, we'll be starting. I will probably be starting from the bottom and working my way up. Once we get to the leg, I'll most likely cover the entire area and work in that regards, just because I'm one of those people that kind of just works all over the place. So yeah, we'll get started with the hoof and then work our way up to the leg as a whole unit. So this would probably not take too long. I highly doubt it. That depends on how well me and Fer get along with this tutorial, but I don't suspect it would be too difficult, because it's got some nice, especially here in the middle where the black and the grey of the leg kind of start mixing. It's a very nice little combination. It's almost similar to the first fur tutorial we did with the appy with the black spots. Kind of similar principles, just different ways of approaching it due to it being flush to a contoured surface. But anyway, let's get started. So I'm just gonna scoot you guys closer. There we go. So we're going to start with the hoof, and as usual, gonna add a layer of graphite powder, tap off all the excess. So I'm going to go into the leg as well for this. I'll just clean up the surrounding areas. I'm just going to use my putty eraser to clean around. I'm going to first go in with my edge pencil. So this reference is quite good. You can get really close up, so this will work if you've got even larger scale. So this is very nice for detail work. So I'm just going to take my H pencil in the Faber-Castell, and we're going to kind of start mapping out. If you see very closely, you will see kind of the shoe as well poking through. You can now decide whether or not you think it's relevant to adding to the drawing. If it's a smaller drawing, then I would not bother too much with adding in those hoof iron details. So for instance, here in the front is where you can see the shoe coming front, and then there's the nails in the hoof wall as well. So you have to use your discretion depending on the size of your drawing, whether or not you think that detail is of any importance to the end product. I personally would probably just ignore it, especially this size. You're getting this size and up, it's a little bit more easier to add, but it's not always necessary to the drawing, in my opinion. So as usual, just looking at my darker areas first. And I'm gonna kind of add depth as well with this pencil. Not really too bothered. In this scale, there's certain little texture details that you would not need to add, but obviously you've got to kind of use your discretion in regards to that. So I'd rather more go, if you go smaller than this, go more for the tonal values and the tonal differences, rather than trying to get all these hoof lines and hoof textures in, just to make sure that once you add your values, it looks like a hoof and has the contours of a hoof. So I'm just going to take my blending stump, blend all around. So for these textures, your eraser will probably be your best friend, and then adding in some lines around it to show depth and show that it's more crease, because creases you'll always have the very light highlight and the very dark shadow. Going back in with my H pencil. So here I'm ignoring the grass in front. And I'm going to add the front part of the shoe. So I think it's quite an interesting little addition. Obviously these surrounding feathers are quite dark, so we don't need to worry about highlighting them out. So for instance, in this case, I'll draw whatever's underneath the hair first, and then draw the hair over top. If this was white fur, I would continuously erase it just to make sure that I don't lose it. So I will be building up the values around it very slowly and softly. I'm just gonna blend all this out. Just gonna take my mono eraser now. We're gonna kind of add in all those little white textures. Now here obviously you can choose which ones you want to focus on. I'm gonna go for the ones that kind of add interest, like the one that goes across the hoof. That's very obvious. So obvious things in the reference you'd obviously want to add, as you would see it naturally in the photo as well. And then you can maybe add something that's very interesting that catches your eye. But you don't always need to add every last detail if your size does not permit it. The larger the drawing, the more stuff you add. The smaller the drawing, you've got to be more picky and choosy about what you would deem important for the viewer to see, important for the drawing. So one artist will maybe focus on one thing and another artist will focus on something else. Since we all don't see the same things in a reference, or have the same thought process about what details to add. So maybe you notice something else that I don't notice, or maybe you see something you want to add. You're more than welcome to do that. Since part of my actual idea with these tutorials is that you take some liberties for yourself during a tutorial, and that I'm just more of a guide for you. So I'm going to take my B pencil now. So this is a very different way of approaching it. I'm not too focused on soft layers as I would maybe for fur. Since the hoof is quite a more of a harsher texture, it's not meant to be soft. You're supposed to convey that it's more of a harder subject or feel. Because obviously when you're drawing, I specifically like people should be able to imagine feeling it and then feeling the texture. So you want to convey that with the harshness in the way you lay your pencils, or maybe not blend everything out. Back in with my H pencil. So you'll see I changed direction of where my pencil is moving as well. That will just also convey certain harshness or harder texture, more coarse texture. Kind of moving around my eraser marks as well. Just take a blending stump, kind of go over certain areas. You can so long look for a 3B pencil. I'm just trying to locate mine, found it. So I'm going to take my 3B. It's either mud on the hoof, or the hoof is probably mud on the hoof in this back portion here. So we're just going to kind of add a rougher texture. Just lightly adding some fur over top. This is my 2H pencil. Using harder pressure. Taking my H pencil now. Just continuing on holding all of our little values and textures. In situations like these, the actual pencil marks and strokes can also be added as texture lines. Take this is my 3B pencil. So just using this pencil to add in some texture as well. Taking my brush, nothing on it. I'm gonna go quite liberally. I don't mind if I go outside the lines, I'll just clean it up. I'm just gonna clean up around with my putty eraser. As if I can find it. I seem to lose things quite often. Especially my pencils and things. I'll put them down and they'll be sometimes right next to me and I'll just not see them. So I'm just going to clean up with my putty eraser. Around. Then I'm going to take my mono eraser, clean it up. Just add in back some of the hoof wall marks and lines. I'm gonna take my HB pencil now. And we're just going to continue along. Just taking my blending stump and blending in there. I'm going to take my mono eraser and just add some lines up there as well. just going to kind of repeat this process a couple of times just to get the desired effect. I'm going to take a 2H and this will just build up those slight little texture differences. Kind of want to connect it all. Sometimes difficult when you've only got one tone to work off in grayscale. Obviously there's a whole different varying bunch of colors of grey, but you can't do that in graphite pencil. You kind of got to show differences in tone. So we've got to be careful as to make it not look blocky or disunited, in the sense that it doesn't all belong to the same animal or hoof. Or so I'll sometimes be a bit more blended in certain areas than in others. Just so that it all looks like it comes from the same animal. .3B pencil. Sometimes you just kind of gotta make a bunch of marks and figure out the best way to move forward. Because it's always not as cut and dry of just putting pencil down, trying to replicate a few things. Keeping my mono eraser in hand, we're just gonna add in details again. Obviously this will all be refined once we get the leg done as well. Just taking my 7B, this is not my 7B, where did it go? This is my 7B, so just taking this. Not really adding too much in terms of color. Add some little lines, textures. Kind of define certain areas inside the hoof wall. not too much. Okay, so just gonna clean up. And I'm gonna take my F pencil and we just go. Just gonna quickly sharpen it up first as well. Just gonna continue on adding a few little texture interest lines, deepening up certain little areas. So obviously you want this to look good from far away. Like I said, most of your artwork won't be viewed with the viewer right in front of it. So you want it to kind of more look good from a distance. That's why I always say picking what details you add, what you intend them to see, really is important sometimes. So just using it. I'm going to kind of move on after this towards the fur, just to keep it going, just to see where to add more depth, and also to just get this also all done. I'll just add a final little addition of kind of little highlights with my eraser. So really have a sharp little edge. Add some here in the mud as well. Adding some interest. Now I'm going to move on to the fur. So like I said, we're going to kind of do it all together. And because it's just easier to kind of keep track of everything, so I'm going to take my graphite powder on a brush. Tap off the excess. And I'm also going to use a blending stump just for the initial stages, and then go in with a mono eraser to kind of start out the fur layering process. So just get a nice even layer down everywhere. There we go. Now I'm going to take blending stump. I'm going to kind of start adding depth. Looking at the black fur first. And then we will be adding, in the interest of the lighter fur, so since there are 3 colors here, we're going to have to pay special attention to our values to really kind of make a discernment between lighter fur and darker fur. So just kind of use the residue to go into where the leg hair kind of comes away. Take your brush and just go over everything again. Use circular motions, kind of almost scratching at the paper if you want to blend out a little bit more. Especially around edges, you will see the powder actually lifting up. There we go. Gonna add some more, take off all the excess. Go. And then just blend that out again. Now I'm going to work down here at the bottom first. work my way up since we've now added a bit of layers. So I'm going to take my mono eraser and I'm going to kind of work from where the bay starts, kind of down, so this area right here. Since there's not a lot of powder on the brush, you won't need to use a lot of pressure. So while doing this, just take note of the direction of your fur. I'm even going to go into the darker areas. And just build up their direction and values. Not values. Direction, and just start layering. That's what I want to say. Layers. And add a little bit of dimension back in, even around the hoof. So as you can see, I'm continuously changing the direction of my fur strokes, and depending on the contour of the so just paying close attention to the direction of the fur, not so much the length of it. But just direction, kind of a concentration. There we go. Not adding a ton just yet. Okay. What I might just do is add a little bit more down here, just for now. Now I'm going to take an HB pencil. Start adding a little bit of depth, as well as the darker contour line. Not contour lines. Where is my English today? Layering. We're going to start layering everything in. I'm also using this to just help with direction of the fur. Not so much shading it in, but actually drawing in the furs. Obviously this is a little bit different than actual fur that we do on the body. I haven't done a dedicated mane tutorial just yet, or tail tutorial, or any type of longer hair that flows, but this is kind of an introduction on how I would kind of manage that as well on hair that is very long and flows more. I'll start the layering process like this rather than actual shading in with the pencils, and more just use the powder to build up those initial layers. It will look messy in the beginning. That's just how it is. Take your blending stump. And then you're just going to blend all over where you put those pencil marks. I'm just going to take it again. And just continue on with the layering. Also just taking note of direction of the hair. Uh, 4B pencil. Very light pressure, not as much as the HB. But just to start adding a little bit more extra little layers and depth. As well as around the hoof. You can use certain areas a little darker, harder pressure, but not a lot. Or just use the point of the pencil to add that in. We're just gonna blend that in as well. Even into the lighter parts, because that will give us our kind of more layered peppery effect right in here. Taking my mono eraser again, and we are just gonna start adding even more little details. Since you're using softer layers and soft pressure and also blending in between, this should not be difficult to remove pencil. Layer. Just use it in a similar manner as you would your pencil, and you'd get similar effects. And you don't need to change up your technique too much. And also in certain little areas I will use the jelly roll, maybe for the really white little spots and little stray hairs, but that would be very few anyways. So this is my F pencil again. Just use it similarly you would your mono eraser to erase. Kind of just frame out. Maybe add a little more depth to certain strands. Start rounding it out. Add a few little stray strands to the bottom of the feather as well. Kind of creates a coarse texture, since these feathers, unless they're very well groomed and conditioned, they have a coarser texture, and you also see that in the reference, so you kind of want to convey that feeling of coarseness. There you go. And just continuing on, you kind of switch between adding little lines to kind of more shadows, actual shading. There's lots of varying little spots. There we go. Just going to take a blending stump and blend all of this in. There's still a method to the whole blending thing. It just takes away the too much harshness and the actual line effect, but just still keeps the idea of it certain, kind of more tones it down, so to speak. This is just my mono eraser, just still just using it, and it still works very well in certain areas. You will just have to clean it up more often once you start using it on the more layered parts of your drawing. Now I'm going in. This is my 4B pencil. So you see, for these types of, when I do a dedicated main tutorial, you will see I'm not afraid to go in with my really dark pencils in the beginning stages. This just helps layer, kind of takes away you faffing too much about it, and it kind of forces you to really go in on that first try and get it done and get it in and just layer it, because with these I find it's not my most enjoyable thing to draw is long flowy hair. Tails, I have to say, is a lot easier than manes, but still not a favorite, because you kind of need to do it right so that it looks organic, because you can't just put a few strands and then Bob's your uncle, you've got yourself tail. I want it to look organic and look natural and not really be different to the rest of the drawing. So you need to take your time, but you also don't want to spend too much time with it and make yourself go all bored and out of your mind. So just continuing on with my my F pencil. So just also using these pencils to kind of blend out certain areas, add more depth. Just kind of establish all our edges. So the F pencil will just darken up certain areas as well, especially where, for instance, the 4B was layered down. This is just another way, instead of using powder, to kind of blend everything in. And when doing these like strands and strays, softer pressure, hold the farther grip on your pencil and more flick outward, so that towards the end it will be faded and not as intense. Just adding in texture lines. And everything should connect in the end in some shape or form and look like they flow into one another and form parts of the same animal. So this is just my 4B pencil again. So just using this in certain areas, because I don't want the whole thing to be black or one shade. I want there to be some shape which shows contours and flowing of the fur. Obviously there is darker pencils that I can still use. using this on the edge as well, where it goes over the hoof. And the same as we did with the F pencil over here, just flick it so that it doesn't, it's not too harsh in the end. I'm going to take my brush, nothing on it, just go over everything. Just taking my mono eraser, going to add a few strands here and there. And you will see, if you get a nice sharp point on it, you'll be able to add nice fine little details. But you need to erase in certain places a little bit harsher than others in order to get the same effect. And this is just my H pencil, and I'm just going to kind of reinforce some of the highlights. There we go. This is now a 7B pencil. Just use the point, not very harsh pressure. Kind of use it to even deepen it up even more in certain places. Also just to add some interesting texture lines and also create some depth in between highlighted furs. Not really shading in with it, just adding fur lines, so to speak. And I'm just going to use my H pencil to kind of blend it out and kind of reinforce it in certain places. So as you can see, very loose with my wrist and with the pencil. And then just take my brush and just kind of soften everything out. Just taking my mono eraser again, just adding a few white strands. It shouldn't be too difficult to remove little areas. Or just add in a little highlight here and there. The trick is just to keep it sharp and clean so that it can pick up the pencil. So just in here, you will see certain areas that don't have a lot of pencil on it will automatically lift. So if they're good enough random spots and kind of not detract from the whole piece, you can just leave it in. Just adding in here as well. And down here at the bottom also. So very quickly something has been established. And these little bottom furs and feathers. You just need to add a little more care for those little top details. Okay. Just gonna take, this is my 2H pencil. Just gonna work around here, also using a flicking motion. So this is kind of where the edge of the actual leg is, and then this is where the remainder of the longer fur goes. So you'll see very soft flicking motions where the hair is kind of thicker. I will shade in just being very liberal here with my strokes. I'm not too worried about it. Just to connect everything. So when doing this, you need to pay attention to the direction of your fur. And just to make sure that you are kind of putting the pencil in the right direction. So I'm just blending out this feathered part as well. Going around to those feathers as well. More pressure in here. There we go. my mono eraser. So you pull from the outside in when you get to kind of the edge. And then just clean up kind of where your razor kind of touched. To the inside. So here's a bit lighter, same as a pencil. Very loose and flowy with your strokes. And kind of flick it into the darker areas, and some of the pencil will lift, and that will kind of just also taper out in the end. My 2H pencil. Around these where you kind of highlighted, I'll just go in and maybe define them, as well as add some shadows in between and around them, so it looks like they are laying on top of a darker fur. My 4B pencil. I'm going to concentrate it on the front of the leg, because that's where the darker fur is more prominent than on the outside. So yeah, I kind of stroke down and then stroke up from the same middle as well, so that there's no real discernible point where you put the pencil down, like a little dot. So you want to be softer with it, and also add maybe more areas of shadows, as it is more predominant. So just taking then now my, what's this, my H pencil. A little bit more softer up here. Softer pressure. Also just feather in this, that it doesn't look as odd. Just continue using that soft pressure, especially around here. and just flick out your pencil for a softer look at the end. Just going to blend everywhere, add in some more, just to blend in certain little areas as well. You kind of never stop faffing with certain areas until you actually just complete the drawing. I'm going to take my 4B pencil again. Just kind of working it in here in between. And then we'll just go in with a mono eraser just now to kind of add more little highlights. So just going up here for the texture of the pencil. Go. Just gonna take my brush, just add a soft little layer. I'm gonna take my mono eraser and we're just gonna continue on establishing all those little fine white hairs. Just take note of course, the direction. I'm going to be cleaning it up quite often just so that I can effectively remove the little strands. Then just add some here at the edge. And also just start adding them in the top here as well. Just to kind of start the layering process. Take your H pencil. And I'm actually going to use a B pencil. Kind of create little edges around some of these hairs, just to give them a little bit of form. So that they're not just one single strand that's kind of poking out. They kind of move in and out of the surrounding fur. Kind of just a way to break it up. Then just take a brush and go over it. Take the F pencil, add a little dimension so the hairs get softer in this area and also shorter in length. Just want to bear that in mind as well. Just take your blending stump and kind of blend in around here. Okay. And just taking your mono eraser again. We're just going to repeat our little process here. And you're continuing adding, removing, adding, removing, and that just helps with the layers and just keeps it interesting and gives it depth. Then just brush over it with your brush. Nothing on it of course. Haven't added anything to the brush since we started. This is my H pencil again. So as you can see, the approach kind of changed going into the lighter areas of fur, and goes more back to our technique we'd use for the shorter fur on maybe the face or the body or the neck. As it's not that flowing, or that long, and that will just also indicate a difference in texture or fur length as well, maybe thickness of fur as well. So just clean up around here, and then just again taking my mono eraser and building up our layers. You will still see some of the little eraser marks you had left there, and you kind of just build on them. There we go. And as you can see, it just slowly pulls up. Just take your brush over it. I'm not kind of brushing right here from the bottom, I'm brushing kind of from the middle upwards. This is my 7H pencil. Kind of using it to build up a little bit of layers down here at the bottom. So not a very dark pencil. So I'm swooping some of them out and some of them I'm swooping around back again towards the leg, because you kind of don't want them all to go in the same direction. Get a few flyaways that stand up differently. Some of them intersect and intertwine. And that's just kind of builds up that. And if you ever think you kind of lost the shape, kind of just take your eraser and you kind of fill it back in the gaps. So I'm just going to take my blending stump, kind of just do the same. There you go. Just add a little depth right here at the back where there's supposed to be more of them. This is my 4B pencil. I'm just going to give it a quick little point. Just kind of reinforce the little peppery effect. Soft pressure, not using too much. This is a little different than maybe I would do on the face and the neck, but obviously since this fur is very light and dark combined, you kind of need to change your approach ever so slightly in certain places. And also there's a few little dark little strands as well at the back here, black strands. So just very soft pressure, just gonna kind of add them here at the bottom as well, sporadically towards the top. Just blend in here a bit more. There we go. Just maybe add more depth in here. As well as in the front here, because you kind of still want the values to be the same as your reference. So sometimes you take away too much and then you just got to add it in back ever so slightly. Just taking my mono eraser, kind of just adding a little bit of interest back in. Just before we go into blend certain areas. There we go. So I'm taking my H pencil. Just kind of going over it again as well. Adding a few short strokes here and there just to change up a few little things. Maybe add a few strokes in a different direction. Because you still want the contours of the leg to be visible whilst you are building up your layers, obviously. Just gonna take a brush, just brush through. Okay, so I'm just gonna take my H pencil and kind of start mapping out this top part. Maybe just start with a powder stump with some graphite pencil on it to tap off all the excess. So I'm just going to kind of help ourselves out. So you'll see this is a lot different from down here. This is quite softest feel to it, shorter fur. Not much in terms of actual contrast between the fur. There's a little white patch here, but not too kind of as contrasted as down here. So I'm just going to take a little bit more. So if you ever run out, just add a bit more on top of the excess. Just adding also some depth in here as well as down here. So after this I will, like I've done with the rest of the leg, go in with a mono eraser and just kind of use that to map out kind of fur direction and a little bit of contours as well. Just using this powder to add a little bit of depth in other places. And then also in here. There we go. Then just kind of, this is my 7B. Sorry, I got a bit distracted down here just for a little moment. So I'm just going in with my 7B. Just to add in a little bit of depth and dimension in here as well. And then just continue that up. Just adding these little details before I do the mono eraser at the top. There we go. Just so now I'm just going to take my mono eraser and kind of map out the fur up here. So for instance, if I was doing the chest area and the remaining, you'll see there's these little white fluffs coming off of the leg. Might not add that. Here's also longer white strands of fur. So I don't have to use a lot of pressure because it's just graphite powder layers up top here. And also the mono eraser doesn't get as dirty as quickly. So just adding a little bit of more shape with the mono eraser. So for now I'm quite zoomed out of my reference and kind of just building up from there. So I do jump around sometimes, kind of when you get to these last little bits, when you're kind of over the peak of kind of going downwards towards completing. These top layers shouldn't take me too long. So just looking at the overall picture of maybe some strands of fur that stands out, or little contours that stand out, something that might need to be highlighted a bit more. So this is just my B pencil that I'm kind of using around my highlights. Just want to kind of lighten up these areas, kind of ever so slightly. So you see now that I'm erasing, there's a lot more depth and surrounding kind of layers to help it out. That it doesn't look as odd when you remove pencil. This is just my B. Just breaking up that. Taking my 7B pencil, then we're just adding little areas of depth. Just kind of adding also in very strategic places to show contour of the leg and little shadows. It's my 7H. Kind of just using that as well at the top here. Add in a little bit of texture lines with the 7H. Can be very liberal with your strokes in this little part. also at the top here. Always bearing in mind the direction that it's going. So the 7H doesn't really add depth, but as you can see when I add it over top of already darker areas added by other pencils, it kind of just blends it out and fills in the grain surrounding the pencil. And as well, it just helps blend out the edges as well. This method might produce some indents in your paper, but I'm not so worried about this because I've kind of already put down the layers, so it won't be as prominent if there was none. Just take a blending stump. Then I'm going to take my edge pencil. You'll see if you've added correct layers like I have, or enough in certain areas, the pencil will not be as dark, or it will have a smoother feel to the paper than it is if you've maybe used it on areas with not as much layers down already. That just means you need to use maybe something a little bit darker. So I'm just trying to kind of get the shape correct as well, whilst adding our little layers of texture. Same as the 7H, just use soft pencil strokes and then just kind of not really shading, but kind of more sketch-like strokes. Now I'm going to take my blending stump and just kind of blend all over, because we still got some bare spots up here where the pencil hasn't layered that much, created a nice foundation. So I'm just going to take a little powder on this stump right here, kind of add a little bit more definition in certain places. Kind of just help the pencil marks with the contour as well. There we go. 7B. just in some little strategic little areas. There we go. Just back to taking my mono eraser. Just continuing on with layering everything and making sure our contours are correct. So now I'm going to use a little bit shorter strokes with my eraser, just because the fur is shorter, appearing shorter on the top of the leg. Edge pencil, and you're just going to kind of reinforce there where you've made your eraser marks. Also shorter strokes than you would have down here, and as well as in the beginning. Just back with my mono eraser, just removing some darkness there. Adding it in another place. So it was kind of messing with the shape of the leg. And just take a blending brush, just quickly blend through there. This is now my HB pencil. You're just going to do the same as what you did with your H pencil. Just take your brush, just blend that in, and I'm also going to take a blending stump. There we go. Now I'm just going to clean up my mono eraser and add in some white little furs down here. You should be able to kind of see if you make the correct little marks, a contour in your kind of a shape in your leg. And also just kind of subtly add some more in certain spots to highlight the area. And then just short little strokes. Not a lot of pressure needed up here because I haven't added a lot of pencil because I wanted to keep it soft. Kind of more out of focus. Yeah, you can say out of focus, not really the main reason for drawing this. My F pencil, and just continue on with that little pattern we've been doing. You can add little subtle lines to define certain areas as well. Just going to take my mono eraser and add in, there's a little highlight of a hair on the feather there. Take your F pencil and just kind of define it even more. So now I'm just going to take Let's see. A jelly roll. If it wants to work, maybe I should get myself a different one. And we're just going to add little kind of flyaways. So you can add it and then press out. Kind of diffuse it first. Because there's not really any need for any very white highlight. So we're just going to take my F pencil, kind of go around the edges of it, kind of diffuse it out. And it kind of has a bluish tint to it, so you kind of have to disguise it within your drawing. See, we don't need white highlights like that, but we need just a little bit of difference. So I didn't blend out that very much. Should almost look like the coarse little strands down here at the bottom. So keep it different by adding little different varying directions of your pencil, as well as blend in kind of the top and the bottom, so that it doesn't just start somewhere. So add some here in the front. Just don't lose track of them, so that you don't kind of have one still sticking out sorely. I'm going to add some in here as well. Press them out, take your F pencil, just kind of go around them and over them. They won't be as visible as they would here in the darker areas. There we go. I think that's a good enough little kind of tutorial. Let me just sign it here. So that's the kind of very basic idea of kind of shaping things with the fur as well, because we did the base layers with our powders and the blending stumps, but we went in straight away, especially in this area, straight away with texture and contouring and a lot of erasing and adding and erasing and adding. And I find that's for me the easiest technique, especially with very long fur and very long hair, is that you kind of have to break the rules a little bit and you have to go in straight away. But yeah, that's the basic, because this will kind of help when we start doing tails and manes and all of that. But I quite enjoy this. This is quite a quick one. Sometimes you find a groove a lot easier and you just get the job done a lot quicker. So I really enjoyed this one, and it will kind of add to other tutorials. But happy creating, and yeah, enjoy this tutorial. I hope you did, and enjoy all the other tutorials that will be coming, and happy drawing.